All right, welcome to our first lecture video. Wanted to share a couple things with you real quick. First off, just kind of the best way for you to make use of these videos, of these PowerPoints. Most of these are going to fall in line with, they're all going to fall in line with the modules, of course, in order that the course goes, but they're also going to follow along with the topics in the book. I make these because I realize that it's very rare that you read something once and then get it. And so hopefully these videos will give you some additional things to think about, as well as hear me explain some of the key ideas, and hopefully that'll help you as you're learning. As you can see here on the screen, I want to talk a little bit about organizations and society. The course, we're going to look at it from two perspectives. One is in the air, right? So if you look in the screen, those are the Palm Islands out in Dubai. And so imagine if we were to kind of fly over organizations and society as a course, but also look at corporate communication from what you might think of as a 10,000 foot view. That's what this is about. And then the second thing is we're going to look at it on the ground. So look at some of the specific things just in this one video. So that is going to be our plan for this particular video. So as you're going through the course, I would recommend that you read the chapters first and then watch some of these videos to kind of fill in. And there's going to be a number of things that we'll cover that won't be in the book as well, just to kind of give you some additional things to think about. All right, so let's get going here. I want to share a couple of key things for you to help you think about, what is this course about, and then how does it relate to corporate communication? So I guess we could sort of start in reverse. First off, this is really going to be situated within the study of corporate communication. Now, the book, of course, is called that, so that kind of probably makes sense a little bit, but I've broadened it to call it organizations and society for a particular reason, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So the first thing I want you to think about is, if you see on the left of the screen, there's a series of circles. And what I want you to think about is there are a lot of activities within organizations, any kind of organization, a nonprofit, an institution like Belmont, or a corporate environment, a lot of activities that in some cases may seem random. They may seem siloed or disparate. And what corporate communication tries to do is it tries to bring them together and to see where activities and where interests and where energy might overlap, or maybe should be overlapped. The second image I want to show you in the middle there is a mosaic. Now, I want you to think for a second, what is a mosaic? Well, a mosaic in its broadest sense is really a collection of random materials, right? It's, it could be glass, it could be paper mache, it could be cement, it could be anything, right? So what I like to think about is organizations are really like a mosaic, right? If you were to zoom in on most organizations, they're pretty messy. They have parts, which are people that have different interests and different abilities and talents and skills and experiences. Nevertheless, they've got to come together and make a picture. And so what I want us to think about is the communication part is really what brings the organization and all of its parts together. So think of an organization as a human mosaic, right? And then the communication is really the glue or the binding agent that brings that together. So in a mosaic, it could be spackling, could be cement, could be glue. For organizations, it's communication. All right. Hopefully you're with me so far. The last image I want to show you is the image of the human body. And I want you to think about the term corporate. Usually we think about corporate in terms of corporation, and that certainly matters. But I just want us to think about corporate as body, right? The word corporate comes from corporare, which means body. And so you could have corporate in many settings. So for instance, if you go to church, right, and you sing in front of and around a bunch of people, we call that corporate worship, because you're worshiping as a body. If you're by yourself, it's private worship, right? If you're praying with people, it's corporate prayer. Same with organizations, right? It's corporate communication. So the reason why that matters is to think about that communication within corporations has to be integrated. It has to be brought together for the spirit of consistency. So communication, to think of it as corporate, is really just a shared experience, right? So corporate communication offers us a way to kind of think about what that shared experience might look like. Okay, so the next thing I want to mention to you as we move on is kind of, where did corporate communication start? So let's kind of wind the clock back a little bit. A researcher, Argenti, talked about how organizations for a long time have always tried to figure out how do they balance making a profit, which is what business is primarily about, at least in the beginning, to public interest, right? Like not everybody that buys products cares about the profit that an organization makes, right? And so how do they balance that? What is a corporation interested in? What does it need to survive? And then what are the people interested in as well? So that's kind of where corporate communication started. And really, it started off with as public relations, right? It was all about how do we get the people in the public interest? How do we tell them what we're doing, activities, philanthropy, and how do we kind of get that message out? So it was really about press, creating good press for organizations, especially as organizations got bigger. Well, it really grew into corporate communication as a way to think about how to integrate a lot of activities within organizations. I'm going to show you that. So again, it used to be public relations, external presentation. Here's an organization, here's what it's doing, look at all the good things we're doing. Then it became, we actually need to communicate with a range of stakeholders, not just the people outside. And so we even considered employees as stakeholders within organizations. So we want to be able to integrate all the activities we're doing, PR and marketing and public affairs and all these kind of things. So then it became corporate, and that's where that body metaphor comes in, all working together, right? Just like organs in a body. How do we then bring all this together? That's what corporate communication does. So really, it's all about, kind of bringing things together, making sure our communications are in sync, making sure things are integrated, that communication processes within organizations are efficient as well, and that they're effective. So that's really what it's about. I'm going to give you a definition in just a minute, and then really kind of broadening our understanding of different stakeholder relationships in terms of, who are the important stakeholders. Reputation is a really critical one, which we're going to talk about a lot throughout the class. The image you see here is Richard Edelman. He is the head of Edelman Public Relations, which is the world's largest privately owned public relations firm. That's actually a picture of him speaking at Marquette University, where I used to teach before I came to Belmont. We had the privilege of listening to him speak one morning for a conference that we organized, a corporate communications summit. And he said this in his presentation, which I just think is so powerful. We used to be the tail on the dog, but now communication is the organizing principle behind many business decisions. So I love that saying. It's really powerful because now communication is front and center. Right? How is something that an organization is going to do as a corporation? How is that going to affect stakeholders, for instance, would be one question. So communication it used to be a peripheral activity, communicating with the press. Now it's central, where communication people are directly tied to corporate strategy. And that's a pretty powerful place for communication people to be in. I want to share just briefly here, in the last couple minutes that we have, a little bit about just just a brief definition for you. And so corporate communication it's a management function. It coordinates internal and external communication, so to the press as well as to internal employees, for instance. And it's all about managing favorable relationships. So think, how do we manage relationships so that we can have a good reputation? That's really what corporate communication is all about. And then you can see, remember we talked about all these different activities that we're going to bring together as a whole. And I mentioned some of them earlier, but they're right here. And so you can see some of those: marketing, advertising, PR, as well. And so corporate communication, think about it as broad umbrella with a bunch of activities underneath. Some big terms that we're going to use are stakeholders. We'll talk about that in the next set of videos. Reputation, so that's a critical one. How do we build relationships with all these different stakeholders to maintain a positive reputation? That's really what it's about. And then it's all about making sure that our different stakeholders that are important have a seat at the table when we communicate with them. So that's really what it is. Then the next thing I want to mention is I just want you to read through a few of these questions as you kind of think about what this course is going to be about. Organizations occupy a critical role within our society. So that's why the course is Organizations in Society. And so how do we communicate effectively as an organization with those different stakeholders? And then broadly speaking, what role do organizations consider, do they play in our society, and what are some of the benefits and drawbacks? So again, welcome to the class. I'm excited you're here, and I think we're going to learn a lot together. Thank you.